Back in April, I was in Portland, Oregon for the Specialty Coffee Association's Expo. And the Specialty Coffee Association wants to release a new cupping form that moves away from the one that we've been using for the last 20 years or so and to a whole nother system. This system really has kind of gotten a lot of consternation. There's some squabbling. There's a lot of people that are like upset about it or whatever. We'll go into that into another video. I got the chance to talk to Kim and Jen just to hear what is the deal. Tell us about it. Let's see if we can learn this system. And in future videos, I'm going to actually try it out to see what it's like. And then maybe eventually we'll start to talk about what are the controversies surrounding it. But for the time being, here's Jen on the basics of what's going on with the new cupping system. So what's going on here?
Okay, so the 2004 cupping system basically combined different sensory tests, which is not good sensory testing best practice, because it introduces biases across them. So you can do 3 different kinds of sensory tests. You can do discriminatory, which is a yes/no. You can do descriptive, which is sort of describing the flavor that's there. And you can do affective, which is your hedonic preference, liking, or impression of quality. So what we've done over the past 3 years after doing a big sort of user research study with 1,600 cuppers, I think it was a literature review on sensory science, then we split things out. So the idea here is that you have 2 separate assessments. The overall system that we're in the process of working on right now is actually going to be 4 individual assessments, but these are the 2 that are ready for sort of testing and public use now. This one is the descriptive assessment. So the idea here is that you're going to rate the intensity of each attribute and use check all that apply boxes that are corresponding to a set of olfactory references that are going to be widely available. And then you have space for freely elicited terms. And there are 2 coffees on the sheet. And we were very deliberate in making sure that these look different so that you can kind of identify them because we're moving to more assessments. So that's meant to be more of an objective.
So we're assessing more than just 10 criteria.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And then here we are assessing sort of the impression of quality. So we're splitting that out. You're using the same categories, but here you're using the 9-point hedonic scale, which is a common scale that's sort of for liking or preference, or you kind of see it in lots of different places, hospitals, food, but it's also really commonly used in consumer research. And what's really exciting about this actually is that this is going to be the first time this kind of system is compatible with scientific research. So it's going to give us a lot more information. So here you're going to mark your sort of impression of quality along this 9-point hedonic scale. You can sort of move things around. So as a cup cools, maybe you want to maybe it starts out at a 6, maybe it kind of drops to a 4, but you have room for your final score. You're also going to mark your defects here. And we, like I said, we were very intentional trying to make sure that they looked really different because they're 2 different sensory tests. Now,
one question.
Yeah.
You said that these are the defects. So I noticed there's still 5 markings. So we're still using 5 cup criteria?
For the affective assessment, when we are specifically looking at things like non-uniform cups or defective cups. So there's also, I think importantly, these forms are the result of a lot of research, but the thing that we're really testing this year is how to use them and the protocol. So there's a beta version of the protocol that's now available. It's really long, but that's because we're wanting people to really sort of get a sense of how to be flexible in using this, because you can use this in all different kinds of scenarios and cases, and you can apply it in different ways. And so what we're really hoping to do this year is to get feedback from the community in terms of what works and what doesn't. And so then at the end of this year, we're going to take all of that feedback and we're going to create what we're calling a provisional version of the protocol. That then moves through standards development. And at that point, once it's been adopted as a standard, it goes through a subject matter expert panel as well as a broad group of stakeholders representing sort of the entire system of the industry. Then it becomes the new standard, and we officially transition to this as the new sort of cupping system that we use.
So is this supposed to, are you supposed to derive a score from it? Or?
You can derive a score from it, but you don't necessarily need to. I think most people are going to end up using the descriptive assessment more than the affective assessment. The other interesting thing that I think happens here is over the course of this research, we've realized that everybody has their own preferences, so we're not expecting people to sort of calibrate to each other. It's more about calibrating to yourself or to a known market preference. So we should expect to see a range of scores for different coffees because we want to understand where these different kinds of attributes are valued in different kinds of places or by different kinds of consumers.
Are we still talking the same scoring system, same scoring range?
So we thought long and hard about, so one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got in the user research survey was that it's really important to do these changes, but also could we please try and move slowly, which is why we've taken so long to kind of work this through, and then we're doing the long sort of process through almost 2025. And I don't know, I think there is a question of, but we sort of, do we keep the 100-point scale? Do we move away from it? I think we were worried that because it's included in so many contracts, that's maybe not something that we're quite ready to do just yet. So we are keeping the 100-point scale, but because we're working to a 9-point hedonic scale for each of these attributes, it doesn't add up in the same way. So we do have an equation that we use to calculate the score, and there's a calculator online. It's sca.coffee/cupping score.
So you enter whatever you put here.
Exactly.
And then it'll
calculate your score on the 100-point scale.
I see. So this new approach to cupping or to scoring, what problem existed that this needed to solve?
I think.
Like, why did we have? What was the problem that this solves?
I think my personal opinion, the 2004 system was really good at, like, it offered us a chance to sort of create a way of talking about coffees that was translatable across the world. But what it did is there's so much more information that we know about a coffee now. And essentially we were sort of taking a high resolution photo, and then we are sort of taking a low resolution snapshot of that, and the cupping form, because we relied so heavily on that single idea of a score, was almost reducing it down to a single pixel.
Okay.
And a lot of times we would end up having to retry to translate back out, right? Because an 82 from Indonesia that's washed is going to be different from an 82 from Kenya that's natural, but there's still 82. And so we wanted a more holistic way to talk about coffee, to include it in contracts and to understand what's being valued in different places, because the whole idea of doing this is being able to try, and if we can understand sort of how and where value is like created and captured, if we can measure that, we can see where it's distributed, and we can try to better connect people with the things that they value, so that there's more value in the system, and we're trying to do it more equitably.
Okay.
So it's very tied to the sustainability agenda that the SCA works to, but it's also about just creating a more holistic picture of a coffee's attributes. So these are just the sensory sort of assessment. So there's also going to be an extrinsic assessment that is in alpha testing right now.
What is extrinsic assessment?
Okay, so there are many different, so we've talked about sensory tests, but there are two different kinds of attributes with a coffee. So you have your intrinsic attributes, which are things like flavor or maybe the physical appearance of a coffee bean. But then you have your extrinsic attributes, which are the things that you know about a coffee. It's the information around it. It could be your geographic sort of identity information. It could be producer information. It could be just stories or sustainability certifications. And we know that this information is really, really important. In fact, it's a lot of what is driving sort of coffee value right now. And so if you think about the 2004 cupping form, there's a very, very tiny little box where you can kind of capture that information. And because we know so much more now, to me, that's the biggest shift about this new system, is that we're creating a way to capture that kind of information and understand, again, how and where it is valued. So it's about, I think the biggest change, the reason why we're doing this is because we want to be able to understand value and better connect people and create a higher resolution picture.
And so when I asked you the question about like what was driving, what was the thing to solve, you said that it was that was your take on it. But what was the take that prompted the SCA to spend the resources to do all this research? Like what are they trying to?
I'm not sure.
You know what I mean? Like what? Like I get what you're saying, like,
Yeah.
from your perspective, but I
Yeah.
mean, like from organizational, like actual, like statement, like what? Why did they want to?
I'm
put all
not
this
sure
money? Okay.
I'm equipped to sort of speak on behalf of the organization.
Okay.
You can maybe ask him.
Okay. Okay. I might ask her. So
I don't know.
and that's
It's just more, yeah.
very good. And so there's a combined form as well.
Yes. So because we recognize it's a shift to go from having, because you don't need to use these assessments together. They work better together. But we think most people are going to end up using the descriptive form, particularly on the trade side. This is more about understanding preference and liking. You can use this sort of with consumers as well. So if you've done a descriptive assessment on a coffee and you can just have a group of people do the affective assessment, you can match those results up later and have a better understanding of sort of maybe where your clusters of preference are. But we also recognize that the cupping form we were using previously, the 2004 version, it was a single form where you had 3 coffees, and so going to sort of multiple forms for a single coffee might be a little bit difficult. So now we've combined it. The thing about this, though, is I would we have to be very careful that you're working across, but that you're mindful of the fact that you're doing two very different kinds of sensory tests. So what am I tasting, and what is my impression of its quality?
Okay, so let's just take the first category, fragrance, aroma, and let's say on the affective form, it talks about fragrance 1 to 9. How are we actually assessing that? Like, how do we assign a value?
I'd say it's based on your expert opinion as a taster, or your personal preference if you're not an expert. It could be tied to a known market preference. So, for instance, a lot of coffee professionals work in multiple different markets and they have a sense of what performs well in different places. I think that's why we've included things like purpose, because you might be wearing a different hat depending on when you're doing the assessment.
Okay. Now, in the world that we're currently in, we talk a lot about calibrating with other cuppers to make sure that we have similar ranges. Is that the same with this, or is that I've heard that's gone away now completely? It's really much more subjective. Is that true?
Yeah, I think it's leaning into the subjectivity that we all do have diverse preferences. It's when you're using this kind of test, it's about calibrating to yourself over time. Okay. And that's how we sort of test it, and also, or to your sort of known market preference. I'd say in one of the research studies we did, it's this idea of intersubjectivity, that we have our own personal preferences, but the cuppers we've been seen in research, are really good at being able to sort of calibrate to each other or to understand a particular preference, especially when you're talking about people working along a particular value chain.
And so, like, currently we're in a world where the cupping score, whatever that may be, really helps to dictate the price of the coffee, or the expectation of price of coffee. Does this change that in any way, or is this a way with all these extra, I guess, variables to assess and to give value to, is that going to help push the prices higher for the farmers, or keep it lower and satisfy the green buyers in that way?
No, I think my hope would be if you score a coffee really highly on your affective assessment, you're going to pay for something that you really value. I think it's if we can sort of, sometimes it takes a little bit of a change in order for us to realize sort of how our mindset is working. And I think this is one of those projects where the end goal is to, if we can think differently or sort of understand how we're constructing value, then maybe we'll actually push forward and deliver on that promise.
All right. Anything else we should know about these forms?
Yeah, if you are interested in downloading them or learning more, you can go to sca.coffee/value-assessment. You'll find lots of information there. We've been sort of collating the resources that we have been putting together over the past 3 years with the project. And you can find the beta protocol and the forms for use. And we're really excited to hear everyone's feedback.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Jen.
Sure.
So Jen was telling me that, like, she gave me her take on, like, this question, but she said it was really more of her position and her personal opinion. But I was curious to know, what is the problem that existed that this new system solves? And why did the organization decide to spend all this resource to do it?
Okay, you could approach that from a bunch of perspectives. From a very practical perspective, it's our responsibility to revise the form periodically, and we haven't done it in 20 years, and that's not a good practice. The industry's changed a lot in that time, so we just need to change. We need the tools to change along with the industry. So if we accept that, then I think from a bigger picture perspective, and it relates to that idea that the industry's changed. We need more descriptive feedback. Like, everyone pretty much that we've surveyed has said the same thing, which is that descriptors are really, really valuable. And the old version of the form did not leave a lot of space for those, or didn't really emphasize the importance of coffee description. Because, if you imagine it from a seller perspective and you get a rejection and a score and no descriptors to kind of justify, like, what was it that you tasted that you didn't like, and what do you do with that? How useful is that information to you? So
has there been a lot of complaints with that from people about that being an issue? Or?
Yeah, I don't, complaints may be kind of a strong word, but I heard Jen telling you about the survey. When we surveyed people about this, that's something where there was almost universal consensus, which is rare with the global diverse audience or group of respondents.
Producers, not just.
Yeah, so we did, interviews in 4 different languages, and we got responses from every continent about this, and people had a lot of differing opinions about things like intensity scales. Some people love intensity scales, want them for everything. Some people hate intensity scales and want them to be eliminated. But everyone wants more descriptors. Everyone sees that that's really useful, especially because we don't just use cupping for green coffee buying. We use cupping now to do quality control, to decide roast level for a coffee. We use it to, generate descriptors for a coffee bag or for marketing purposes. So if we're using it in all of these ways, in most of those applications, it's the descriptive part that's useful. The affective part of the scoring is actually not as useful or necessary as I think that maybe our previous way of doing it would have led people to believe.
Okay, so in this, what's the part? 1 to 9 is the assessment side? What it's called?
Yeah, affective assessment, so liking.
In that case, we're how are we? Let's say when people are coming in to try this, everyone's going to be new to it, whether they're 30 years into it or just starting out. How are they really supposed to think about assigning a number?
Yeah.
To whatever to let's say fragrance.
Yeah. Well, this is on this form, and it was true in the old form too, there is a guide or a key for how you're supposed to think about it. But I think what's easier about this approach to it is that we're telling people that this is your subjective assessment. When you use the affective form, you are thinking about how much you like this coffee or how much the customer that you're purchasing it for is going to like this coffee. You're not thinking about it as objectively good. So the key says 5 is neutral, and then below that is slightly dislike, that is slightly like, and then you go kind of outward from there. But someone can, even if they're less experienced, have that reaction to a coffee, and I think it's reasonable to imagine that they could say, I like this slightly. This is a tool, this 9-point hedonic scale, that's used in so many industries. It's used with children, because it's something that people can understand, how much do I like something? Even if we're not using the numbers, it's just an immediate response.
So it's just about what we like as individuals rather than on an objective criteria.
Yeah.
Very subjective. Okay.
Yeah. So the descriptive side is where the objectivity comes in. Cuppers can calibrate around a descriptor like acidity, or pick a descriptor and we can calibrate around it. We have sensory references for that, but we're not trying to calibrate people in their liking. So if you really like super fruity natural coffees and I really don't, then neither of us is wrong and neither of us has to change. You may have a different customer than I have, or just, if you're buying for yourself, or we might be serving different markets, and we think it's a good thing that there are buyers of super fruity natural coffees and also that there are buyers who have other preferences.
But is that to say that our current practices have been that, let's say I'm a natural fan and you're someone that thinks that all naturals are defective. Mm-hmm. Does that necessarily mean that we have to think that it's wrong, or we're unable to assess qualitatively that coffee despite our preferences? Is that what it's trying to eliminate, or?
No, I think on the contrary, we're really trying to say that this is, in sort of a qualitative way, we like different things, and that's not something that we want to change. If we worked for the same company, then maybe we might need to calibrate to what the company style was. But in that case, there's a reason for us to do it, which is we're basically buying or we're cupping for the same end user. But if you're cupping for you or your consumer, your whatever customer, and I'm cupping for me and my customer, then those can be different, and that's probably good for the industry that we want to create, where we're matching the lovers of natural coffees with the producers of natural coffees, versus saying, okay, let's decide if naturals are good or not, and then collectively, if we decide they're not good, tell producers of natural coffees to stop doing that.
Okay. And so now with the current two forms, there's the descriptive, is that right? And then the
Affective,
thank you. She was telling me that there's a calculator that you enter information in that will calculate a score based on how we currently score coffees. Mm-hmm. Is that strictly from the affective side?
Yeah.
Okay. So only the affective side is how you derive the score.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no scoring, no scoring descriptors. So it can have a really citrusy acidity, and you might really like that, but you record those things separately. It's citrusy, and also, it's got a light mouthfeel, and it's all of these different characteristics over here. And I like it over here, but we don't mix them together anymore and have a feedback that says it's citrusy, I hate it. It's citrusy and I scored it a 71. Did you score it a 71 because it was citrusy? The way that the form has worked and kind of the communication around it has worked, those two things have been difficult to tease apart a lot of the time. If there's descriptive information at all, which again, there isn't always, and people really want it because that's what is sort of easier to work from versus scores, because your 83 and my 83 are not going to be the same. Especially, are we cupping coffees from Ethiopia? Are we cupping coffees from Brazil? Are they natural coffees? So you need a lot more information than just the score to be able to really know anything about a coffee.
Okay. And then she mentioned that you're currently working on a third form.
There's the combined form, which is, if you were cupping for that full picture of the coffee, you would use kind of both of those together.
But she said there's another one that's coming. I thought she said
we just released the draft protocol, so it's a 60-page document that really outlines all of these ideas, and the mechanics of cupping haven't changed much. It's not like we're changing the coffee to water ratio or grind particle size for cupping, but we're changing the way that we are asking people to use the process to make decisions or as a tool for communication. And it's all, that logic is all explained in there. I know what you mean, extrinsic assessment. Yes,
thank you.
That's the thing that's in the works. No, it's okay. That's the thing that's in the works. And that is not really part of the cupping process because those aren't things that you taste. You can't taste an organic certification. But they are things that we know, both anecdotally from our own experience and also from research, are things that drive purchasing, drive decision making. It's it isn't actually all about the individual flavors. It's also about who the producer was and what country it came from and how it's roasted and whether or not it has the certification, et cetera, play it out from there.
All right, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
sure.
very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
All right, so there's some basic information about the new cupping system that's coming up from the Specialty Coffee Association of America. They've got the descriptive form, they got the assessment form, then of course there's the combination form, and then there's going to be another one about the, what is that called? Where you're looking at certifications and other details that aren't necessarily going to be impacting the way you score the coffee. What do you think about this? Is this going to be a good thing? Is it going to be a bad thing? Will it be divisive? Do you think it's necessary? It seems that we're moving away from objectivity towards more subjectivity in the way that the evaluation of the scoring is, and I definitely have some thoughts on it. I'm going to hold on to those thoughts until after I've actually tried using the scoring system myself to really get a better feel for it. There's some things that didn't really ring true to me. We'll get to that in future videos as the summer progresses. But I hope that's information that can help you. If you have any comments, I definitely want to hear about them. Drop them down below. And until next time, see you later. Here on the farm, that's what we do.